Hello friends, welcome back to the Casual Foodist. I'm Brianna and today we are making one of my favorite recipes for cozy season, apple scones. And these scones just happen to be topped with a delicious maple cinnamon glaze. These scones have been one of the most popular recipes on my site for years and with good reason. We've got fresh apples, we've got cinnamon, we've got maple. I mean, who doesn't love these flavors? And the best part is, these scones are pretty easy to make. Let's get started. Let's run through our ingredients. For these scones, we are going to start off with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1/2 cup of unsalted butter, and you're going to want to pop this in the freezer for about 15 to 20 minutes before you make your scones, and we'll go over that in a minute. 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1/2 cup of buttermilk, and the acid from the buttermilk, when it reacts with the baking powder, is going to make our scones nice and light and fluffy. 1/4 cup of granulated sugar, 1 large apple, and we are going to peel and dice this. I'm using a Fuji apple because that's what I've got in my house, but you can use Granny Smith apples, Honeycrisp, whatever you've got on hand. We've got 2 large eggs. One of these we're going to use for our dough, and the other one is going to be used for an egg wash at the end. In here I've got cinnamon and nutmeg, and you're also going to want a little bit of extra cinnamon at the end when we make our glaze. 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract, and 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt. In addition to the cinnamon, for our glaze at the end, we are going to need 1/2 cup of powdered sugar, along with 2 tablespoons of maple syrup and 1 tablespoon of whole milk. We are going to start this dough off with our dry ingredients. So first we have our all-purpose flour, and again that is 2 cups. And then we've got our 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and again, don't confuse this with baking soda. They are not the same thing and your scones won't turn out. 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, and then we're going to add our spices. I've got 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and then also 1/2 teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg, and these both just smell like fall to me. And then we are just going to go ahead and whisk this up all together. In another bowl, we're going to work on our wet ingredients. So we are going to add in our buttermilk. And again, when this interacts with the baking powder, it's going to make these scones nice and light and fluffy. 1/4 cup of white sugar, our vanilla extract, 1 large egg, and then we're just going to whisk all of this together. And we want to make sure everything's nice and combined, especially that egg yolk. And then last but not least, we are going to add in our apples to the wet mixture as well. And I've gone ahead and peeled and diced 1 large apple. I'm just going to make sure our apple is all covered by our wet ingredients. And we're just going to set this aside while we work on our butter. For any recipe where you want a light flaky dough, thinking scones, biscuits, pie dough, you want to make sure your butter is as cold as possible, which is why I had it in the freezer. And then to get butter all throughout our dough, I like to go ahead and grate it. So popping your butter in the freezer for at least 15 to 20 minutes is going to make it really easy to grate. And then your butter is also going to be nice and cold, so we get those nice flaky layers in our scones. Now we're just going to add our grated butter right into the flour mixture. And you want to use a light hand with this to keep our layers of butter separate. almost there. All of our butter is nice and coated with our flour. And then we're going to add in our wet mixture with our apples right into the bowl here. And then again, we're going to use our hands. These really are the best tools for making scones. And you're just going to go in and mix everything together here until a light dough comes together. Now it's time to shape our dough. I've got this wonderful baking mat with all the measurements here. That way I don't have to break out a measuring tape or a ruler later on. And I am just going to set a piece of parchment paper over top of this. It's fairly sticky, so you're going to want to go ahead and flour your hands. We're just going to turn our dough right out onto that parchment paper. There we go. And then using our floured hands, we are just gonna pat that right into our 8-inch disc. And I'm gonna go ahead and make sure our apples are evenly distributed throughout. All right. Using the parchment paper, I am just going to slide our dough right onto the baking sheet. And then using a bench scraper like I've got here, you can also use a butter knife, and no matter which one you're using, I recommend coating this in cooking spray to help this slide a little bit better. We are going to divide our dough into 8 different scones. I've made an egg wash using 1 large egg and 1 tablespoon of water, and you're just going to take a fork and whisk that all together. And to make sure our scones have a nice golden top, we are just going to brush this over the top here. All right. And if you don't have that extra egg, you can also use some heavy cream for this. Our scones are all ready for the oven, and I've got my oven preheated to 400 degrees, and we're going to bake these for 20 to 25 minutes or until the scones are nice and golden brown. Our scones are out of the oven and they smell amazing. While they're cooling, let's go ahead and work on our glaze. We'll just set these right over here. For our glaze, we're going to go ahead and start with our powdered sugar. We've got 2 tablespoons of maple syrup, 1 tablespoon of whole milk, and this is just going to thin out our glaze a little bit. For a little extra punch of spice, we're going to go ahead and add in our cinnamon. Then we are just going to whisk this all together. And you want to make sure to get any lumps out of your glaze. And just look at that. Last thing to do is just drizzle this all over our scones. And then using a spoon, we are just going to drizzle our glaze over the scones, and feel free to use as much or as little as you'd like. A little bit more here. These scones are all done, and just look at how beautiful they are. These scones are going to be great for breakfast, dessert, as an afternoon snack with your coffee or tea. And I think these would be great for a holiday breakfast like Thanksgiving or Christmas. There's just one last thing to do. So we've got to give one of these a little taste. First thing I'm getting is that maple and cinnamon glaze right off the top. And then I got some really sweet fresh apple in my bite. These are so good, you've got to give them a try. You can find a link to the full recipe below or at casualfoodist.com. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the Casual Foodist for more recipes like this.